be curious about your people. Create that space, create the time to like really understand who they are, what they're carrying, what they're passionate about.
Welcome to FutureWorks, DK and everyone else. This is a podcast dedicated to the conversation around innovation within the workforce space. So here we are all together to share research, nerd out on inspiration, take a deeper glimpse into what we're building and learning here at Aspect, which we'll get to do more of today. Michelle and I dive into conversations with leaders. We scrutinize case studies, dig into theories, psychology, and share what it really takes to reinvent solutions within the workforce industry. I'm Gillian.
And I'm Michelle, and we're your hosts, leading you through candid conversations on what's happening in the world of work and how we can each play a part in making it a bit better. So you just heard Gillian mention this, and we have mentioned it in passing in the intro every single week. But today, we are specifically highlighting the company that we both work for. Aspect is reclaiming its identity as a leader in workforce management innovation. But that's like a lot of corporate in one sentence. So don't roll your eyes. Stay with us because instead of a commercial for a company that sells a product that an individual is probably never going to purchase, we want to introduce you to one of our favorite individuals, our CEO, Darryl Kelly. His vision is driving our innovation at Aspect. And we think once you hear about what's happening here, you'll find ways to implement pieces wherever it is that you show up day in and day out. So I think DK's LinkedIn story tells kind of everything you need to know about him if you know how to look for it. Not just the posts, not just the pictures, but I think it's full of insights about the world through the lens of his background and his family. I think DK's breadth is wide and it's unique because he did not grow up the son of some tech mogul and he did not get into college on a golf scholarship. I don't think. Did you?
No.
Okay, great. Just making sure I get fact check myself.
Choir scholarship. Let's start there.
So instead of those things, DK has consistently been the brightest star shining in every room he's entered. And often those rooms are dark with the ruts of the way we've always done things. And what DK brings to those conversations is the way we can do things.
I'm excited for DK to introduce himself. I'm also excited to kind of tap more into what human-centered innovation means to DK, talk a little bit about product-led strategy and where form meets function in that manner, dive into more kind of visionary realizations that DK has had lately around the modern workforce and what we're all capable of offering within the modern workforce. And of course, we got to get into DK's headspace a little bit around like what makes him personally successful in the day-to-day. So we'll be asking some of those hard-hitting questions. But before we get started, DK, let's hear your background. Set the tone.
Set the tone?
Yeah, set the tone.
I don't know. Michelle did a pretty dang good job. She did a pretty dang good job.
Yeah. She knows you pretty well.
She does. She
we should probably admit that.
We should admit that. Michelle keeps my world running. So yeah, thank you, Michelle, for that. Look, I think that I have organizational and professional ADHD. I also personally have ADHD. And so throughout my life, instead of seeing that as a limiting factor, I've just chosen to, apply that professionally, and it's worked out pretty well for me. I've always had like 1 to 9 jobs at a time. Even when I was younger, it's always been like, all right, well, there's this thing, and then there's this thing, and then there's this thing. But it always was a few different intersections, usually in the corporate world. There was always something consistently in the corporate world, always something in the creative space, and then always something in the coaching or personal development space. So I'd say that those are the intersections of my being. But first and foremost, I would say I'm a dad, and I love being a dad. I love being a husband. Those are like my number one priorities and drives everything that I do. I don't know. I could talk about my background, but I guess that's what LinkedIn is for. And Michelle already did a little bit of that. But look, my life started in consulting. I was that weird kid that was like, I want to be a consultant when I grow up. And I did it in that
The deadpan, I will be a consultant.
I will be a consultant. Kids are like, I want to be a firefighter and I want to be a doctor. And I was like, no, I want to go explore a ton of different things. And so like consulting always felt like something that was interesting to me. And it's like, this is back when like, Anderson consult, like there was always like the big 4 or 5, consulting firms. And I loved consultants. I think I had a few parents that were consultants and they were like rock stars in my world, like they came in to school and it was like they were floating, because it's like doctors, there was like a heaviness to them and, like the traditional high visibility roles, doctors, lawyers, and teachers, traditional executives, but the consultant parents just seemed different. And I was like, I want to do that. And then I pursued that very aggressively. And I also knew that I wanted to be very creative as well. Photography has been something that has been a consistent in my life, my entire life. I was shooting film and developing my own roles whenever I could. And then I would also drop them off and then be like, okay, I'm going to be back tomorrow and I want these developed. And here's the paper that I want to develop. Like I was that kid. So those are kind of been the consistencies. It's like photography and then something in corporate America. And now I'm here. I don't know. I hate intros. I really do hate intros. Michelle knows that. I hate intros. It's like, I don't want to talk about myself, but I guess I got to get better at talking about myself. No, I don't.
Yeah. No, we're going to be talking about you for the next like 50 minutes. So we'll work on it. But also I love to hear that you identified consultant. You knew what that was at an early age. You were already ahead of the game.
Well, I mean, my friend's dad, Mikey, and we'd always do sleepovers at his house, was a consultant. And so I would hear calls that he would have and I'd hear him talking about it. And so I would just always hear like deals and what's happening at this organization. And I was like, ooh, this sounds like so much fun because I have ADHD. So it was not just one box of a thing. Every single time I was at their house, his dad was talking about something different. And I think I just loved that. I was like, oh, that's man, cool. Like that fits for me. And I think that I still bring that like curious consultant like energy into every environment that I come into, right? Like I come in and it's like, okay, situational awareness, limiting factors, right? Like there's a template that I bring and, I like that.
I'm excited to hear you talk about this aspect. We are building something that very much is embodying the direction of human-centered innovation and design. And so I'd like to tap into kind of your definition of human-centered innovation and what it means to you, and what it can mean to be human-centered at work and how you kind of play on that.
Yeah. Look, people are at the center of everything, and I think we forget that. I know from my story, when I would walk in to work at a Big 4 consultant firm when I was out of college, it was like, this is who you are supposed to be, right? It was like, this is what it is to be an Accenture boy, right? You had to dress like an Accenture boy, and you just kind of like started fitting into what it was like to be in that world. And it was funny because my background, my master's is in industrial and organizational design, organizational psychology. And so there has always been this like curiosity of like, I think we're getting it wrong because like, don't we want individualism and uniqueness as a part of this larger thing as well? Like it's important to have a corporate container, right? It's important to have values. It's equally important to have our own unique identity within that because we're creative beings, right? Like at our root, we are creative. And when you think about the problems that we face in a workplace, whether that's, designing a new product or even as a doctor, right? If you're a doctor, if you're a firefighter, it's all a creative endeavor. And yet we leave half of our identity at the door. And I just firmly believe that the most productive organizations on the planet are the ones that tap into creating a space where everyone can belong and belong in a way where they can bring their whole self. And that's what I believe around this like concept of human-centered design is it's like create spaces for people to be at their best, create systems and meeting structures and cadences that are focused on people being at their best, and then create an environment where we can go at any moment, pause, time out, you just said you had a really hard day. I'm not going to skip over that. I'm going to treat you like a person.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about what you're carrying and what you're bringing into this space? And they get this so right in Hollywood. When you go into the writer's room, they don't just go in the writer's room, shut the door, and then just start writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't.
Yeah.
Pardon me. I told you I had the man flu. They don't just start writing. A big ceremony is like stepping into what you just stepped out of is a big concept in Hollywood, specifically in the writer's room. And they'll do things like, what are you bringing into this space? And that's really important because then I see you. I'm like, oh man, Gillian's bringing a little bit of weight. So, I need to consider that as I'm engaging with her, and you feel better. And then I see you, and then we interact with more purpose and intention. And I think the results are exceptional when we create that space. And I'm seeing it happen here right now at Aspect.
That piggybacks a little bit on a conversation we had last week with another guest. It's just getting to know the people that you're working with and that you're managing on like a really personal level. That's human-centered, like embodied actually. And I experienced this with you, DK, 2 days ago when I was talking to you about, we were hopping on the phone to talk about something else, something work related. And I got to tell you about my stresses about maternity leave. And it's such an interesting element of leadership. I'm curious, like, how could a leader lead with human-centered top of mind? Like, you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to unpack that a bit further.
Be curious about your people. Create that space, create the time to like really understand who they are, what they're carrying, what they're passionate about. 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes, right? I think that's all we talked about. It was 5 minutes. And you were like, hey, here's this thing that I'm carrying. Okay, let's go talk. I'm like, wait, hold on, Gillian. Like you just dropped a bomb. And how can I move on from that? And I think that that's an important trait. Like we have to be much more emotionally intelligent. I think we put too much emphasis on like high IQ, and IQ is important, but EQ is equally as important because at the end of the day, we're getting large amounts of people to try to like each other and integrate with each other to go do and solve hard things. We need people to do that. We need to see people as people. And so leaders need to slow down a little bit to speed up. And in that slowing down, it's just creating the space. It's a little bit of space to just see people. That's it. It's so simple. Just see the people that you're working with. Ask them, hey, how's your day? What are you carrying? What are you worrying about? What's on your mind? And it's in those connections that we can show up better, because then when we have to go do hard things, we're not doing hard things with people we don't like. We're doing hard things with people that we adore. And it just makes things different when you're doing hard work with people you adore.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And it's more work to do this when we're all remote. Like it just is. It requires, conversations are more truncated. It's 30 minutes on the calendar. So you're trying to get it all in, but it goes so much further if you're taking the time to get to know folks. And I love what you just said. Be curious about your people. What is this person asking you that needs your help or product? What are you solving for this person? What is at the core of what this person needs you to solve for them? How can you make it better for them? So I'm curious. Let's hear your perspective on that toward human-centered product.
So look, the curiosity, like we've got to move out of this concept of transactional, right? Like we've become so transactional and individualistic as a society. And so really what being curious about the things that we're creating and designing and having a relational approach to that means that you're thinking about the user on the other side, right? You're thinking, is this painful for them to interact with this, right? Like just putting them in their shoes, that's an empathetic process to do. And so when it comes to creating products that we love, think about it. It's like you obsess over it. You obsess over, well, does that button make more sense here? Or does that button make more sense over there? And that is an empathetic process, right? It's a relational approach. It's something where you move from, well, what do I want, to what do they need? And if we can start owning that from a software development point of view, not just like, what do I need and what do the features need to be? But it's like, we need function, right? We need function. Things need to be robust. And there is a human on the other side of that. And if we could just consider the human on the other side of that and not just give them the bare minimum, but it's like, man, what would really delight this person? What would make them go, hey, come see this thing. It's so cool, right? I want to show you like how this thing works and how this thing works, because you know what we do that with? We do that with hard goods constantly, right? Like, why do people make irrational decisions to go spend $2,000 a year on a new phone? Because it's beautiful, right? Like, it's beautiful. The way that you hold it and the materials, and you think about Apple and these like industrial type designers, they spend so much time considering the form factor. We don't do that enough when it comes to building software. And I think that that's what's going to make the difference in our company specifically, is we're considering the human and the humans that are behind the product more than any other. I don't know. I can't speak on that. I'll say it. CEOs can say things like this, but I think that we're considering it more than any other brand, software brand in the industry. I want things to be, I've said this since the beginning. If we don't do anything and the only thing that we do is create beautiful and intuitive products, then we've won. And I really, really, really believe, I think I said sexy as hell, actually. And they're like, hey, you got to please tone that down, right? We need some more safer work language. And I was like, okay, beautiful and intuitive designs. But it's like, man, like I want things to be timeless and beautiful and stand I want them to be beautiful and timeless. That's it. I could be concise there.
I love it. Well, that leads us to more kind of product oriented talk. Double clicking on human centered design and innovation is kind of the concept of product led strategy for a brand. And so we want to spend some time on that and more or less let's tee it up for the folks listening that might not know about product led strategy. Maybe you can unpack it a bit further and share a definition from your perspective around what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our point of view, we've been in this stage at Aspect, at Alvaria, where we've just been sustaining growth, doing the bare minimum. And I'm fine saying that openly, because that was what we thought was best, right? We're going to do a little bit here, incremental here, some managed services, some custom design here, but we weren't owning this space that we need to own of being the innovator. And that's what I mean by us returning to product-led growth. Is at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to create products that people want, and that people not only want for a small use case, but they want to go, oh wait, hold on, you can do that. Well, what about this? And then what about this? And what about this? That incite ideas and spark creativity and innovation. Like that has to come from us. And so when you think about product-led design and product-led development, it's just considering that there is a product at the end of the day, and everything drives from that, right? Like early startups get this really well, right? They understand that like we have to create something tangible and then to continue to improve on that. We see this in, the hard goods space. We see this in automotive, right? They understand that at the center of it is a product. I think in software, we lose that a little bit, because it's like, oh, well, there's services around it. And then, oh, we can do some custom configuration there. And then you start to scale a little bit and you go, wait, hold on. We can't get rid of that feature because this one customer is using that thing. And we kind of just like erode and chip away at like, no. Like at the end of the day, we are a product company. We are a software company. It all ties back to making sure that we are delivering on continuous innovation every single day, right? And especially in the SaaS world, this isn't application service provider anymore, where you like, I bought the disk and that's the product, and this is the version that I have. When people are committing to a 3-year contract with you or a 5-year contract with you, they're also committing to ongoing innovation, right? They're committing to continuous value from that product, not just the product that they bought that moment. They're committing to the vision that you have for the product that it's going to be in the future as well. Like they're almost like expecting you to help pull them into the future. And that's what product led truly means, is it's like delivering on the value that every single day the product gets better, 10 times better in terms of the value that you receive from it. And that's what we're relentlessly pursuing. And then the little uniqueness on top of it, beyond being product centric, being design forward and design centric as well. Because it's not just good enough to have a very a very functional product, a very robust product. It needs to be easy to access and easy to interact with, right? We obsess over, is it easier to put that button there or there? Or do we even need the button? What would it look like if that data just presented itself, right? Like, how do we reduce cognitive fluency? How do we make our users' jobs easier, right? How do we consider their needs? How do we obsess over well, if they did this, what's the next thing that they're going to, right? Like that's being centric on how we continue to deliver value from the thing that they interact with day in and day out and day in and day out. And the job is never done. It is never done.
I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying about like you're investing in this contract and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to trust this company to continue to iterate. I think, you mentioned Apple. Obviously, we are used to like products being marketed to us as like, trust us, we're going to keep innovating. How would you say, can you break down for us, how do we know when a company is actually going to keep innovating? Like, what are some like flags that we should be watching for?
Yeah, I mean, look at their history, right? I mean, go look at their changelog. Go look at the way that they democratize their roadmap. I mean, that's the great thing about the world that we live in right now is it's all accessible. It's all out there. And if you don't have a company that's transparent about where they have come from, right, you can see it. If like you go and look in their documentation or you go the Wayback Machine and look at like how the versions of their website have got, like you can go and look back and like, wait, that version is literally the exact same version as that version is the exact same version as that version. Look at change logs, right? Like there's evidence that exists that we as consumers or business consumers should probably be a little bit more skeptical of in terms of that process of like what materially has changed this quarter over last quarter. Right? Like when we go through that buying process as business consumers, we have to ask, hey, where were you last month? Where were you last year? Right? Like we look at the current product and go, oh, this is great. This is what I'm buying. We all should start asking questions like, hey, what did last version look? What did you change between that version and this version? And where are you going in the next 3 versions? Right? Like those are all applicable questions that we should be asking when we go through any type of buying process. We do it as consumers, right? Like we know, iPhone, I don't even know what version, I don't have an iPhone, so I don't even know what version it's on. 16, 17. But we can tangibly compare version 1, 2007 iPhone to 2025 iPhone, right? We can see the innovation. We can see the iterations. It's tangible. As we consume software, we have to find ways to make it tangible. And I know that when I buy software, I'll go and look at screenshots, right? Like that's on like, go to Google and then look at images. There's so many screenshots there. Go to Capterra, go to G2 Crowd. You can look at where they have come from, and that should give you a good indicator of where they are going.
That's a great example. Curious, why aren't more WEM software like companies and brands in the process of this pivot to product-led strategy, or why haven't they done it yet? Why do you think?
I think that they are, if I'm being honest, because they're continuing to focus on the functionality of the tool, right? And they go, okay, well, it's got to have this feature, and it's got to have this feature, and it's got to have this feature, and it's got to have this feature. And so when I think about like how products evolve, they evolve from functionality, right? Oh, it's got this new report, and it's got this new thing. If it's not easier to access that functionality, the form factor around it, then have we really created a substantial and meaningful product? Probably not. And so I would say that like, I do believe that a lot of our competitors and a lot of the people in this space believe that they're moving the industry forward in a very healthy way because they're adding more function to the product. And I think that where we are at right now, we need to be adding function, form, and we need to be leading a vision that is beyond the world that we exist in right now. I think that a lot of our competitors get stuck in present state, right? Like there's like this idea of like present bias. And then there's like, oh, well, we're going to go trust analysts, and analysts say that we got to go do these 5 things. And if we do these 5 things, and then customers can even mislead you, because what customers are going to do is they're going to say, we need this very specific thing. And this goes back to the creative process, right? And why we need to be creative and human-centric as an organization is because we need to do a good job of interpreting and understanding intent. Because a lot of times what customers will do is they'll say, we need this exact thing. And then most companies will go, great, I'm going to build that exact thing because this is what this very large company asked for us to build. Instead of going, well, why? Hey, help me understand, where do you guys want to be as an organization in the next 5 years? This is the relational thing. So I think what happens is we take a very transactional approach to building technology, and we have fallen victim to this. And I would say it's what's led to a lot of our stagnant growth. Like we have a very robust, a very, very, very rich product that customers would go like, I don't feel like anything's really changed. Although when you look at the change log, we've almost implemented every single thing that a customer has asked. But what we haven't done a good job is going, well, let's collect a lot of trends and datas and then pay attention to pay attention to macro environmental changes, right? Like how are employees changes, right? How are employees changing? And this goes back to, we have to be human centered. We have to pay attention to multiple variables, multiple inputs. We have to be creative and then go, here's our thesis on that. And you're going to get it wrong. But it's this process of continuous improvement, continuous iterations that'll allow us to go, well, we pushed this 20% further, 50% further, 30% further. And now we came back a few steps, but then we pushed it 50% further. That's the creative process. And I think that when you look at a lot of our competitors, we don't have competitors, and I not just mean like in our space, I think in the broader software space, we don't do a good job of pulling our customers to the future. Instead, we get into this cycle where we depend on them to tell us where to go. And I want to hear from our customers, but I don't want you to tell me what feature you need. I want you to tell me where you want to be in 10 years and then us be a good partner in helping deliver. We have to be the solutionist. We have to come up with the solutions at the end of the day.
My husband is an architect, and people will be like, I want more, I want more of this. I want more of this. I want more of this. And you can't just add more rooms to a house. You have to redesign the house. Like, sure, let's get you a second dining room. But in that case, we have to redesign the whole thing. And I think we get a little bit off there in software because suddenly you have this software and yes, it does all of these incredible things. But if you don't rethink the design, then you have this house, that has this like tiny foundation and all of these complicated things on top of it with no way to access those pieces.
Could not agree more.
I think that leads us pretty well into kind of the next main idea and like main value we want to get to on empowering the modern workforce with flexibility and inclusivity. And having sat in a couple of rooms before, I know that like literally the word choice is always like, well, is that the word we want? Is that really what we mean? And so I want to hear about, let us into the room where the discussion happened about using the words flexible and inclusive.
Yeah. All right. So look, I probably should have talked about my background a little bit more to give some context to this, but after I stepped out of the consulting world, because really why I stepped out of it is because I wanted to own something. It was great to work on a lot of different projects, but I realized very quickly that I wasn't actually owning something and moving things forward in the way that I had imagined or aspired to. And so I stepped into the BPO, business process outsourcer, specifically in the contact center BPO. And, when you're that close to agents, I was at a BPO and helped scale to, tens of thousands of agents. And when you're sitting next to agents, you start to understand and realize that there's humans behind the ones and zeros, the forecasting, scheduling, and adherence, right? Like there's humans that are like, I'm not trying to not show up. I have life happening on the other side of this thing. I was on the way in and I got a phone call and I found out that, something happened at my kid's school. That became number one priority. And the way that we show up as a contact center sometimes is like, oh, well, we're going to put you on a pit because you've missed 3 schedules. And it's like, man, like that's not the society that we want to create. Like that's not creating the most productive environment, because what happens to that employee, right? They go, oh, so you're going to just have this transactional relationship with me and then come in and expect me to do my best when you really don't care about who I am. And so this is a little bit of the passion that I'm uniquely bringing into this space. Is it's like, I want to give, flexibility and agency and autonomy to agents, because when they're seen and when they feel like they have this sense of control over the way that they show up better. Right? They do show up better, right? Like there's a lot of programs that we ran when I was in the BPO, and given like you had to work your way up to this agent level, but you basically got to choose your own schedule, right? And they didn't get forecasted in crystal reports. There was like a segment of agents, and you could lose the status as well, but they got to choose their own schedule. Those agents outperformed every other agent in the contact center. I want to be able to do that at scale. And, we talk a lot about like diversity and equity and inclusion. It's like, but what policies, like what strategies are we pointing to create a more diverse and inclusive world? And I think that, when you go look at Uber and you go look at Lyft and you go look at some of these platforms that you can come on and go, I choose my schedule, I choose how I show up. And the technology helps enable that. That's a diverse technology. That's a technology that helps create a more inclusive environment. It creates a space where a working mom that has a very working. I don't. Shouldn't even say working mom. See, there's some bias there. When you have a working parent that has a very variable schedule, man, the contact center can be such a great space for them. But it's technology limited because it's like, well, we got to have fixed schedules. And if you don't fit into this schedule, then you can't fit into this environment. It's like, well, we figured it out. And we disrupted taxis with Lyft and Uber. Why can't we do that exact same thing in the contact center? And I think that's what it means to like really humanize this space is it's like, this should be a role every human would love to do, right? Like there's brands that we interact with and engage with every single day. I would much rather, right? If I'm Nike, I would much rather have an army of individuals working for my brand that absolutely love my brand, where they become advocates. And maybe it's the college student. I'm pointing at CU right now because it's right there. But maybe it's the college student that's like, I can only work 10 hours. I can only work 10 hours. But man, I know everything about dunks. You want that person on the phone, right? Technology should enable that in a meaningful way, because now you're not just taking a cost center, you're now taking that cost center to a profit center, right? Like we talk a lot about like, oh, how do we increase CSAT? I don't know. Maybe the people that are on the other side should absolutely love working for your brand and representing that brand. And that starts with, how do we focus on getting the right tools and the right resources to the right employees and seeing all of them, not just pieces of them, right? Another thing that we're really chasing after as it relates to inclusivity and seeing the entire persona of an individual is adding attributes to an individual, right? It's not just like, what shift can you work? What interests do you have, right? Because we know all this data and all this information about customers. Why aren't we using that to then inform who they talk to on the other side? Right? Like, how cool would that be if, like, Gillian, you got attached to Michelle, and you and Michelle are just basically having a blast of a conversation around a really complex topic. With the introduction of AI and chatbots, right? Like, they're handling these low complexity interactions, which means the interactions that actually mean something when someone picks up the phone, they're the relational ones, right? They're the ones that are like 10 minutes, right? If you're on the phone with someone for 10 minutes, that's a significant amount of time. Like I was actually looking at my call log the other day with my wife, and our average call between each other is a minute. Those are transactional calls, right? But then when there's the long ones, when I'm away, it's like, okay, we're getting caught up on what happened with the kids, and like that can happen in a contact center interaction. And we should incentivize that and create a world for that to exist. Because when I leave that interaction and that employee is happy and I'm happy, it's game over. Like I want to keep interacting and I want to keep working for that brand if I'm the human on the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's a great transition into our next question, which is amplifying human potential through AI and emotional intelligence. You've just spoken to kind of amplifying opportunities and connection through AI. And here we are talking about human-centered design and innovation, but we also are in tech. We like streamlining. We like leveraging tools that make what we're doing more impactful. So let's hear more from you around how AI and emotional intelligence kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, you picked up on the word that I've been saying like consistently for the past few months, is this concept of emotional intelligence. And I think I've said it in a lot of meetings and specifically with our data scientists, and when I talk to our product folks and engineers. But really what I'm trying to get to, and if I do one thing with my life here, it's creating a world where instead of using technology to make the experience more efficient for the customer, it makes it more effective for the employee, thus making the experience more efficient for the customer. And so what do I mean by that, right? Like effective computing, emotional intelligence, right? We already have the tools right now today that are recording every single interaction. And there's some really great things that are happening with effective computing right now with AI, deep learning and machine learning, where they're able to identify individuals that have autism, like early indicators, early markers of autism, just by paralinguistic cadences, sentiment, with AI, right? Like, why aren't we using that same data, that same information to go, hey, man, it sounds like Darryl just had a hard call, or he's a little sick, right? He said he's sick 4 times on that hey, Darryl, do you need a break? And then the tool just takes care of it, right? And then it takes care of it in a way that it's not punitive to me, right? It's like, hey, you got some sick hours. We've gone ahead and taken care of all of that. That's what I feel like we as a technology provider can go do that's going to leave a big dent in the world, is just using the technology that exists right now, that's accessible, to help make the people that interact on our platform, their lives better. And that's the concept of effective and emotional intelligence.
We can get behind that. We know you well. It's no secret that you utilize AI in your personal life and your professional life as a leader. Let's get more information around how you utilize it as Darryl Kelly.
Man, I don't even know where to start here. Yeah, I do, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Is it a secret? Is it like a secret weapon for you?
It's not. Well, it is a secret weapon. Actually, I was training my model the other day, and I was like, this kind of feels like cheating a little bit. But it's a great thing, right? So, I've been, reading about, large language models and machine learning and deep learning and object recognition for, maybe 5 or 6 years now. And, the first thing that I have learned, since kind of like 2018 period is like, nothing is new right now, right? Like artificial intelligence, genuine intelligence, singularity has been something that we've been talking about since the 50s. And there's a lot of great examples of, how intelligence has increased probability and outcomes have evolved. But it's like this concept of generative intelligence, where it's leveraging a large language model and it's able to have reasoning, and there's little intricacies around neural networks right now that's happening. But like the concept is, it's like it's able for the first time to connect dots in ways that it hasn't, and then generate a response from that. Now, the response isn't always perfect, right? Like when you think about what happens in the model, what happens from a processing point of view, and I will get to the answer here in a moment, but I have to go back to then go forward. But what's happening is it's like there is an input, and then there's tokenization, right? Like it's giving context to that input, or it's trying to give reason or meaning to that input. And then now we're at the point where it's learning, right? There's self-learning tokenization, where the context is happening from a variety of different inputs. And then there's an output. That output, I think what we have understood historically is it's like that output is the end all be all, like that's it. And now where we're at is we can train that output that then goes back into the tokenization. So every single time you interact with that model, it's more refined is the best way to say it. And so what I did to get deep in this, because I think that it's important that leaders that are responsible for developing AI and have an input or a voice around it, should know it at a very, very, very rudimentary first principle layer, but also interact with it every single day to understand the limitations, understand where there's privacy concerns, right? Understand that like, hey, if I'm putting data in here, I don't want that to be shared that is now training the entire model, and I put something very personal in there, and I don't even realize what's happening. And I'm like, hey, I'm struggling with X, Y, or Z, or whatever that may be. And then it trains it. And then someone's like, hey, tell me about what Darryl Kelly is struggling with, right? Like those are the general privacy concerns that exist, right? And so you can take that and apply that to an enterprise layer, where it's like your data should be your data. What you train should be what you train. And so what I did is it's like, okay, great. What is a use case that I can focus on, right? Because I think that we have taken a term and we flattened it called AI, and it's become so general. And I said, okay, what's a use case that I can just like go deep on? And so I can get more practical in my understanding, my relational and day-to-day understanding of where intelligence is at right now. And since generative is, the tool that is most being leveraged specifically for consumer application as well as business application, I wanted to take a first principle use case. And so what I did, I'm a serial journaler, both written, and I use Day One as a journal. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, but if they do want to sponsor me, I'm open for that. But I use Day One journal, and I, do a written journal. There's some prompts that it gives me sometimes, but mostly the way that I interact with my journal is it'll take a recording and take that recording and then use AI, right? Which most people wouldn't think think it is AI, artificial intelligence, but when you're doing a text to text to transcription, that's intelligence, right? It's using a natural language processing understanding to go, okay, Darryl said this, and now I'm transcribing it as such. And so I'll talk to my journal for about 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes a day. Sometimes stream of consciousness, sometimes a prompt, but I've been doing that for the last 11 years. And so I had a data set. Sorry, this is a lot to get to the point that I said that I have a data set.
It's interesting.
And so my journal became that data set, the same way that every enterprise, every company has a data set. And I started with, what's the current state? Well, the current state is I have this data set called my journal. And then I thought through, well, what's the future state that I want, right? What do I want from this, right? And that's what we constantly have to think about when we think about AI is go, what's current state? What do I want in future state, right? If you can just start there, we can be much better practitioners of AI. And so what I said for what I want in future state was, I want real-time feedback as if a therapist or a coach was with me every single day. And so I started training this model. I uploaded all of my journal information and I had to train it. And I think that's what people misunderstand about these models right now is they expect them to be perfect, right? When there's hallucinations, you have to give context back to it. Like the same way that you're raising a child or the same way that you're onboarding an employee, that's where these language models are at because they're generalized, right? Like it's consumed all of the internet. Great. What does that mean? You have to give it meaning. You have to give it depth. You have to give it context. And so the reason why I say that it's like a little bit of my secret weapon right now is because I have a real-time therapist, coach, mentor, and advisor that knows me based off of 11 years of journal data that can challenge me in such meaningful ways. And so I didn't plan on doing this, but I'll do it since we're here. But the other day I was struggling with clarity. I'd say. I think that's the best way of describing what I was struggling with. And so then I recorded what I was struggling with and what I was sitting in. And it was about a 20-minute recording. And in 10 seconds, I had a response from my model. And it says this. It sounds like you've been through a transformative journey of clarity, discovering a lot about your instincts, leadership approach, and the importance of selectively choosing who you let in when you're in such an emotionally charged season. Here's what stood out in your reflection. Trusting your instincts and empathy and leadership. There's more underneath this, but you don't get to hear that. These are just the bullet points in terms of the way that it's structured. And there's like sub bullets underneath it. Creating space for clarity and reinforcing your voice, balancing personal brand vision with organizational goals, avoiding isolation and staying in the right conversations. That's why it feels like cheating is because typically I'd have to call up my coach, my therapist, Eric, and I'd say, hey, Eric, man, I want to have a session. He'd go, okay, well, I think we have you booked for in 2 weeks. Okay, cool. Like, do you want to move it up? And I was like, no, well, actually, you know what, Eric, it's not that important. We can go catch it. Let's just keep our. And so in that moment where I was like emotionally charged and I wanted to try to identify how to process through these emotions. And honestly, like I censor when I'm with Eric, right? Like if you have been through therapy, everyone knows you give a little bit of censoring. And I have been working with him for, 8 years now, 9 years now. And I know that I censor with him, right? Because he's a person that I know is judging me. My AI model is not judging me. And so what it's allowed me to do is it relates to it being my secret weapon is it's turned the mirror. It's held the mirror up in a really meaningful way to say like, pay attention to this, hold on to this. And, one of the things that it came as a sub bullet that I will give you is not everyone needs to be your audience right now. Isolation can sometimes be tempting as you work through difficult decisions, but you're aware of the importance of select purposeful connections. This balance between necessary solitude and selective connection will keep you centered and supported. These are the things that we're pursuing is how do we use our rich data sets from forecasting, scheduling, adherence, quality, gamification, and performance. Because I am so close to the model day in and day out, I am in a unique position to help our team think differently about this data, right? Because it's a data set, right? And we want something from that data set. I did not get this model to the point that it's at from day one. This is like 9 months of training. And it's like, hey, I will say things like, I don't like that. I didn't like that response. That didn't make sense. Try again, right? Like I am constantly human in the loop to refine this model. And I'm going to have to continue to refine the model. And so that's why, yeah, it does feel like a little bit of a secret power right now, because I've got this model that knows me, I think, a little bit better than I know me at times, to give me feedback in real time. And I think that's really what we want from intelligence. Like, we don't want it to be artificial, right? Like, we want it to be homo economicus, right? We want it to be perfect. We want it to be perfectly rational, to go, hey, Darryl, over the past 6 months, you've been struggling through this exact same theme. Let me point out that theme, and also the cognitive distortion that is behind that theme, right? We want it to be perfect. We don't want it to be artificial, but we have to train it to be perfect for our environment. And that's what we're pursuing here at Aspect. So sorry, that was a lot. So I love this right now. So tell me to shut up.
No need to apologize. I mean, we're literally asking the questions.
Yeah, I think you've inspired some folks with that to get their models trained.
Every leader should be doing it. If you are in technology right now, you should be playing with some type of model day in and day out.
I do want to kind of take this kind of big, a bit heady, in good ways, conversation and bring it down to now what? So as you think about someone in an organization who is a doer, not in a people manager position, someone who's a doer, what do you think is a most important action step that they could take out of this conversation?
I think I'll say it right now. Become informed beyond superficial topics, right? Go beyond the headline. Go read a book, pick up a few books, be curious beyond the headlines. I think that would be the number one thing that I would recommend. If you're an individual contributor, if you're a manager, if you're an executive, go deep, go deep, go deep, go deep, go deep, go deep, because the headlines are just headlines. They're just headlines. Go get some depth.
Would you add anything different if you're thinking about, like, what action steps should a leader take?
No, I think it's actually not like, I think it's a requirement. If you are a leader right now and your company is pursuing anything within AI, you should know the basics of algorithms. You should know the basics of machine learning. You should know the basics of the difference between machine learning and deep learning. You should know about large language models. You should know about foundational models. Like, there is a handful of things that is required ongoing learning with this new technological revolution that we are in. It's a requirement, right? Because if you don't have the depth, you will be left behind. And so if you're a leader, leading an organization is your responsibility. And it's simple, right? Turns out we've got really great tools that can help you learn faster too, right? Like, if you're hearing me right now, you may not even have to go read a book, actually. Go to ChatGPT and say, write me out a lesson to teach me about machine learning and basics of algorithms, and then go revisit it every single day. And then when you have a question that goes deeper, go deeper with it, right? Like, I probably should have said that as the first answer, is just go use AI to learn about AI. But I do recommend reading books because books are able to focus on a narrow topic in a way that give you depth that AI won't. But to give you the foundational first principle kind of idea, go to Perplexity, go to ChatGPT, go to Bard, whatever you want to do. Teach me the basics as if I'm a 5-year-old about a large language. That's my recommendation.
Easy to do. That's what we want for our listeners. This was so helpful, inspiring. I think a healthy dose of a peek behind the curtain, both from, a CEO's perspective, but also from what we're doing at Aspect. Aspect's our biggest sponsor of the podcast, technically. This has been fabulous. We really, really appreciate your time today. Michelle, any parting words?
No, I loved it. And I love the challenge to go deeper. I am absolutely a chronic headline reader.
Yes. Agreed.
Don't snack. Go get a whole meal.
Yeah. Get full on facts.
Mm-hmm.
DK, what about you? Parting words?
Yeah, man, just be nicer to yourself, right? I think that we do a really good job of being our own worst enemy. And I would say my life changed the most when I changed my relationship with myself. And turns out that's the only thing that you can really control anyways. So, parting words, go find a way to be nice to yourself. Take yourself out on a date, give yourself a hug, write yourself a note. When we are nicer to ourselves, we're nicer to our world, and we're able to unlock more within ourselves. We're able to heal the hurt things, right? The hurt and broken things inside of us. It all starts with just being a little nicer to yourself. I know it's an odd thing for a CEO to say, but be nice to yourself.
Thank you. I think we could all use that advice. Thanks everyone for listening to FutureWorks. Click along to subscribe. And DK, Darryl Kelly, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for inviting me.
And thanks for sponsoring.